Last night on this show, a rare and wonderful thing happened. You ready? Look. Look at that grin. Whether you love Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, or you hate him, or you don't much care, but you see him on the news sometimes, one of the things that is a reliable constant about good old Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is that he's kind of a tough guy. And I don't mean to say that he is cheerless, but whether he's talking about good news or talking about bad news or breaking news, or Bernie Sanders looks very serious all the time. You know Sam the Eagle from the Muppets? By which I don't mean to suggest that Senator Sanders is not perfect in every way, but he is not a big smiler. And so last night on this show, it was news in and of itself that we got this big toothy grin out of Senator Bernie Sanders live on TV. We had him on the show last night to talk about the unlikely achievement of him coming to an agreement with Republicans about a bill to help veterans. Senator Sanders famously put forward a big effort in February to help VA health care, but Republicans in the Senate filibustered it. There was worry, even after this current VA scandal and all the upset about the VA right now, that Republicans were going to filibuster it again and we were going to get nowhere in terms of actually fixing the problem. But behind the scenes this week, Senator Sanders was able to get Senator John McCain to sign onto a deal with him. And the expectation is that their deal is going to bring on enough Republican votes to actually get this thing passed for veterans. So something might get done. And Senator Sanders beamed. And I'm not kidding. It caused spontaneous applause in our control room when he showed us his pearly whites. Since the deal was announced, IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, they've put out this statement saying they applaud the compromise. They hope it gets done. Between the bipartisan endorsements and Bernie's smile and IAVA saying yes to this, politically, there really ought to be nothing that can stop it. It's interesting about veterans groups, especially on days like today, this D-Day commemoration, right? Veterans groups in the U.S., at least the big ones, they're usually treated with really widespread respect, even deference when it comes to policy on veterans issues. That's why it was so shocking recently when the opposite of that happened. This past Memorial Day, Republican Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, who's the top Republican on veterans issues in the Senate, Senator Burr on Memorial Day put out this open letter ripping America's veterans organizations, telling them they were doing a terrible job. He said the most recent Senate hearing on problems at the VA, quote, made it clear to him, specifically veterans groups' testimony at that Senate hearing, made it clear to him that veterans groups were more interested in their own livelihoods and their Washington connections than they were in the needs of their own members. Wow. Well, their testimony at that hearing must have been really terrible to earn a rebuke like that from a senator on Memorial Day, from a senator who isn't even a veteran himself, right? Well, here was that testimony. Look at how upset Richard Burr was at that hearing when he sat there listening to that testimony. Look at how look how upset his chair is. Senator Burr? Now, it's possible that he was in his chair but slumped all the way down onto the floor so you couldn't see him. But actually, cameras in the hearing room captured, look, there he goes, this moment, when he actually got up and walked out as soon as the veterans groups began their testimony. Richard Burr got up and left as soon as the veterans groups started talking. And he only returned at the very end of their testimony to tell them, thanks very much, you guys, but actually, you got to get out of here.
Not that I don't love you guys, but we're going to try to get the next panel in before we get into a series of votes that will bring a finality to this. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. In this case means please leave. Richard Burr getting back to the room just in time to tell the veterans groups to leave after he skipped their testimony. Their testimony, which he later said was so upsetting to him, he had to send out an open letter ripping veterans organizations on Memorial Day. I should note, though, that this particularly cowardly form of failure is not just a Richard Burr problem, although he does wear it well. This particular kind of failure happens a lot right now in Washington. Over the last few years, this has become a very popular way to make a fool out of yourself as a politician. Here's another instance. This tape I'm about to play, for example, this is one of the all-time great recorded instances of Senator John McCain accidentally hitting the angry button when really what he might reasonably have been aiming at instead was the button marked I'm sorry or I'm embarrassed. But since those apparently are very tiny buttons that are very hard to hit and the angry button is enormous and always in the way, he hit angry. Senator John McCain screwed up badly and he sort of emotionally misfired all of his anger right into the microphone of CNN's Capitol Hill producer at the time.
Peppers flaring on Capitol Hill. Senator John McCain lashing out at one of our CNN producers who questioned why he was missing a key hearing on the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. McCain has been a sharp critic of the president and his administration, complaining lawmakers are not getting enough information. And when asked why he missed that meeting today, he lashed out.
One of those Republicans who did not go to that briefing, it was a classified briefing, was John McCain. Now, McCain at the time was having a press conference yesterday, lashing out at the administration for not getting enough information and calling for a select committee to investigate it all. Well, our Ted Barrett caught up with the senator earlier today and wanted to know why he didn't go to that briefing, and to say the least, it did not go well.
CNN then posted the audio exchange between their producer trying to get Senator McCain to explain how he could justify this kind of thing. I mean, there's a classified briefing on Benghazi. It was going on that day from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. John McCain did not go. Instead, at noon, he scheduled his own press conference demanding more information on Benghazi. He had to skip the meeting with the information about Benghazi in order to complain that he was not getting the information. Do you care to comment on that, Senator?
Listen, I understand that you did miss this briefing yesterday. But
I'm not, no more comment. I have no comments about my schedule, and I'm not going to comment on how I spend my time this evening.
I mean, is there
I will not have no further comment.
Is there a legitimate
I have no further comment. I have no further comment. How many times do I have to comment? Why can't I? Because I have the right as a senator. I have no comment. And who the hell are you to tell me where I can or not?
I'm a reporter. I'm asking a question.
And I'm giving you an answer for the 10th time. Get away from me, please. Please. I have no problem.
There were no documents. Did you make a mistake by not attending that? You're very mad about it. You must have been.
Senator McCain really did skip a briefing on Benghazi so he could instead hold a press conference demanding information about Benghazi. That really happened. Senator McCain's office later called it a scheduling error. But it's a kind of error that a lot of these guys seem to make now. In October, as Obamacare was rolling out, the administration offered an expert briefing on the rollout to House Democrats and to House Republicans. House Democrats accepted. House Republicans reportedly ignored the offer. And then when House Democrats did get their briefing, House Republicans said they were outraged that they weren't having one too. Fox News headline, Boehner calls for briefing after Republicans are snubbed. Speaker Boehner put out a statement, far too much information about Obamacare's rollout is being concealed from the public. All members, as well as the American people, deserve answers for this debacle. That's why we've asked the administration to provide the same briefing to House Republicans. Now, briefing had already been offered to them and they didn't even bother to respond. But after that statement, the administration said, okay, if you really want that briefing, we'll schedule it for you. And then they held it, the one that the HHS briefing that the Republicans demanded, and, well.
What kinds of questions did members ask, and how many members are in there?
I would say there's about 20 members in there.
20 of them showed up. For context here, there are more than 20 Republicans in the House. There are more than 10 times 20 Republicans in the House, but only about 20 of them showed up after they were so outraged that they were not being offered information that they apparently actually did not want. It is so much more fun to demand information than to actually receive it. Receiving information is boring, takes forever. It's totally not like just going on Fox News and complaining. It's like a dog chasing a car. It's so much more fun to chase the car than to actually catch the car. What are you going to do with it once you got it? But this is an increasingly frequent modern political failure, and it has just happened again in a really big way on the new thing Republicans want to be a scandal. This is Senator Saxby Chambliss, Republican from Georgia, top Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee. This is him speaking on Fox on the show that's hosted by my friend Greta Van Susteren, which means this was happening at 7 p.m. Eastern. It was a live interview. It was not on tape. And what that means is that Senator Saxby Chambliss was live on Fox News, in this case, talking about how the administration was denying Congress the information they needed about the Bo Bergdahl prisoner exchange. Congress is out of the loop. The administration hasn't explained what they did. More information is needed. And while he was doing that interview, the administration was conducting a classified briefing for all United States senators to explain those exact things. Senator Chambliss walked out of the briefing in order to go on Fox News to complain that he couldn't hear what was being explained to him because he left so he could go on Fox News and explain that he couldn't hear it. After that briefing was over, Chuck Todd tweeted that a lot of NBC personnel were trying to track down senators who'd gone to that important classified briefing on the Bo Bergdahl situation, the one they were all complaining about, right? According to Chuck, quote, many are admitting they left early. Quote, amazing that so many senators from both parties didn't stay for the briefing until the end. And you know, there's lots of briefings, and they're almost never mandatory, and you can go if you want to or not go if you want to. The problem is when you don't go or you leave early, and then you're outraged that you didn't hear enough. Like Senator Saxby Chambliss, and like, once again, Senator John McCain. Senator McCain did go to the beginning of the Bo Bergdahl briefing. Reportedly, Senator McCain stayed long enough at that briefing to ask one question, but then he walked out shortly after shouting at an official over what he considered to be an unsatisfactory answer. So the Bo Bergdahl hearing this week, John McCain turned up, asked one question, apparently hated the answer he got, screamed at the person who gave him that answer, and then left. He walked out to a nearby camera and said about that briefing he had just walked out of, I learned nothing.
I learned nothing in this briefing.
The one he left in the middle of. It must be hard to be a member of Congress. I don't want the job. I don't know very many people who do, but it cannot possibly be part of the job to demand information that has already been offered to you and that you've decided not to listen to. It cannot possibly be part of the job to insist that you've been denied critical information that you yourself were too lazy or otherwise occupied to bother to absorb. This is a new and increasingly frequent form of really political lying in Washington. It depends, getting away with this lie depends totally on us being ignorant and easily led when it comes to actually what's going on in that big, boring, catty high school called Congress. There is a reason to know what hearings are going on when and who's invited and who ought to be there. And yeah, it sounds boring all of a sudden, until all of a sudden it's the punchline on some ambitious member of Congress turning himself into sort of a laughingstock. I mean, if you're skipping the briefing so you can complain that there's no briefing, we're not laughing with you, Congressman. We are laughing at you.